Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Remembrance Day Ceremony here at Centennial College's Story Art Center. My name is Jeff Turner, and I'm a second-year student in the Broadcasting, Film, and Television program. This year marks the college's 60th Remembrance Day anniversary, as well as a special occasion for us here at the Story Art Center, as this will be our final ceremony taking place here before we make the move to Progress Campus this summer. Remembrance Day commemorates the end of World War I on November 11th, 1918. The very first Remembrance Day ceremony will be held the next year on 1919. And every year since, people from all across Canada have gathered on this day to pay their respects to the brave men and women who gave their lives to protect our freedoms across all conflicts. The symbol of Remembrance Day is the poppy, immortalized in poem by Lieutenant Colonel Dr. John Alexander McCrae in Flanders Fields. This day is a day of reflection, to reflect upon the sacrifice that our brave soldiers have taken and how that sacrifice impacts each and every one of our lives to this very day. My personal connection to Remembrance Day is through my grandfather, the man who I get my name from, who fought in the Second World War. At 20 years old, he joined the British 8th Army as a reconnaissance soldier and fought from 1939 until the end of the war. He fought in both the African and Italian campaigns, fighting in the Battle of Tunisia, as well as the Battle of Monte Carlo, among many others. When he finally returned home to England, he found that all of his house and all of his possessions had been destroyed by the bombs dropped by the Germans during the Blitz. With nothing left for him there in England, he decided to make the journey to Canada to start a new life in peace, which that decision is the reason that I'm able to be here today, standing in front of you and speaking. My grandfather didn't like to talk about the war, but he was one of the lucky ones as he lived to see its end. Not many other people were that lucky. And today, I want to take some time to talk about some East York heroes who gave their lives to protect our freedoms in the Second World War. This research comes from Professor Malcolm Kelly's work on the East York Collegiate Memories Project, documenting the lives of students who fought in the Second World War and gave their lives to protect our freedoms. Our first story is that of William Lister Jr. Born on October 1917 to parents Mary and William Sr., William grew up at 279 Gledhill Avenue in East York before eventually settling at 203 Cosburn Avenue, just a short walk from where we stand today. William's father was a First World War I veteran and a founding member of the Woodbine Heights Legion branch. William spent 1 year at East York Collegiate before transferring to Danforth Technical School. He was both an avid reader and proficient athlete, participating in both hockey and swimming. After finishing school, William joined the Dufferin and Haldimand Rifle Militia, and when the war broke out, his unit was called to service. For the first 2 years, he was based in Ontario, where he married his girlfriend Lily in March of 1942. The couple relocated to Nanaimo, British Columbia, with his regiment to protect Canada's western coast. In October of 1942, William was transferred to the Royal Regiment of Canada and sent to Britain, separating him from his new wife less than a year after their wedding. By March of 1943, he was transferred again, this time to the Royal Hamilton Light Infantry, known as the Rileys. Just months before William joined them, the Rileys had suffered devastating losses during the raid in Dieppe in August of 1942. 197 soldiers killed in action and another 175 taken prisoner. This represented over 50% of their total force. William spent almost 20 months in Britain undergoing intensive training for the Allied invasion of Normandy. The stress in this period took its toll. He was disciplined twice for going absent without leave and was demoted back down to the rank of private. As part of the invasion force, the Royal Hamilton Light Infantry joined with the Royal Regiment of Canada along with the Essex Scottish Regiment to form the 4th Infantry Brigade of the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division. William and his division landed on the shores of France just 1 day before D-Day. The fighting raged on for over a month, and on August 11th, 1944, the 2nd Division was fighting southeast of Caen along the last remaining open road for the surrounded German forces. Leading the advance towards Claire-Tisson, the Rileys were ambushed by German tanks just about 600 yards past the village of Barbary. And under an intense barrage of both mortars and artillery, the regiment lost 20 soldiers and suffered another 100 wounded. William Lister Jr. was among the fallen. He was initially buried in the field where he fell before eventually being laid to rest in Bretteville-sur-Lez Canadian War Cemetery in France. He was only 26 years old. Our next story is that of Albert Victor Carter. Born in 1922 to parents Edna Carter and Albert Carter, Albert grew up in 116 Springdale Boulevard in East York, just west of Coxwell Avenue. Like William Lister Jr., Albert was also a student at East York Collegiate, though their times at the school never overlapped. Albert was also a prominent athlete, competing in basketball, baseball, and swimming. After graduating, he found work as a delivery boy for the R.W. Redmond drugstore. At 19, he had the opportunity to fly as a passenger in an aircraft. He fell in love with flying instantly, and his passion led him to join the Royal Canadian Air Force in July of 1941. His skill and dedication quickly identified him as a future pilot in the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan. He trained at Belleville Elementary Flying School in St. Eugene and later completed his advanced training in St. Hubert. After 10 months, in April of 1942, Albert Victor Carter earned his wings. He was then sent for 18 more months of training at the No. 3 Bombing and Gunnery School in McDonald, Manitoba. During his training, Albert fell in love with a woman named Bernice. They would marry in May of 1943 and move into his parents' home. 4 months later, in September of 1943, Albert was sent overseas to England. Just like William Lister Jr. before him, this young family had been torn apart by the war. Shortly after Albert arrived in England, he received a letter with joyful news. Bernice was pregnant. By December of 1944, Albert had flown in 6 missions, with his seventh scheduled for that year on December 12th. Flying a Halifax bomber, Albert and his crew took off from Yorkshire, England, heading off towards Germany. Only an hour into their flight, tragedy struck. Their plane collided midair with an Allied Lancaster bomber, piloted by fellow Canadian Harold Schufelt from Medicine Hat, Alberta. Both planes came down just east of Yelvertoft, England. All crew members were killed on impact. Albert's daughter was only 7 months old at the time. She would never meet her father, a hero of the skies. Albert Victor Carter was laid to rest in Brookwood Military Cemetery alongside his crew. He was only 22 years old. Our final story is that of the Seeley family, a story of 3 brothers and unimaginable loss. Harold, Albert, and Jack Seeley all grew up together in 857 Salmon Avenue. All 3 brothers would attend East York Collegiate and competed in hockey, baseball, and cricket. After graduating, Harold found work as a clerk with the T. Eaton Corporation. When the war broke out, he enlisted, followed later by his younger brothers. Harold had a passion for breeding birds, which influenced his decision to join the Royal Canadian Air Force. His youngest brother, Albert, would also join the RCAF in 1942. Jack, the middle brother, would enlist in the Royal Canadian Ordnance Corps. Initially washing out of pilot training, Harold would be sent to train in Rivers, Manitoba, where he eventually graduated as an observer. He was then sent to England, serving with the Snowy Owls in the No. 6 Group Bomber Command. On January 29, 1943, Harold and his crew took off on a mission to attack German U-boats near Lorient, France. And despite the brutal weather conditions that made the mission especially dangerous, the crew pressed on towards their objective. When they reached their target and attempted to drop their payload, the bomb failed to release. After repeated troubleshooting attempts, they were forced to return back towards England, with the bomb still stuck. Unintentionally flying over Plymouth, they came under fire from anti-aircraft guns, but managed to escape unscathed. Soon after, the stuck bomb suddenly released, falling into the English countryside. They made their way towards the airfield at Exeter. Limited by the visibility due to the horrific weather conditions at the time, the crew circled multiple times searching for the pundit light that identified the location of the aircraft. Just as crew member Hank Ernst spotted the light, the aircraft crashed into a hillside and exploded. Harold, along with most of his crew, were killed on impact. Miraculously, Hank Ernst and another crew member, Delmer Sanderson, survived, though severely injured and burned. Harold Seeley was laid to rest in St. John's Cemetery in Somerset, England. He was only 23 years old. Albert, the youngest Seeley brother, learned of Harold's death while still training at No. 9 Bombing and Gunnery School in Montjoly, Quebec. Albert would graduate as a bomb aimer and would be sent to RAF Lakenheath in November of 1943. On January 28, 1944, 1 day shy of the first anniversary of his brother's death, Albert took to the skies on a mission to drop mines into the Bay of Kiel. This mission was particularly dangerous. They would need to fly over the heavily fortified Frisian Islands, bristling with German searchlights, radar, and anti-aircraft guns. Just off the coast of the island of Romo, the crew came under attack by a German night fighter. The order was given to dump all the mines to reduce weight and hopefully escape. But it was too late. The aircraft was shot down, crashing into the shoreline of Romo. All on board were killed. 2 days later, on January 30th, the Seeley family received a telegram informing them that their son was reported missing following an overseas air operation. By 1946, all crew members had been identified and laid to rest in Esbjerg Cemetery in Denmark. Within the span of the year, The Seeley family had lost 2 sons to the war. Jack Seeley, the middle brother, survived the war. He returned home and raised 3 sons of his own, right here in East York. As we approach the start of our ceremony, let me briefly outline how today's events will proceed. The Royal Canadian Legion Branch 10 will begin with the marching of the colors at 10:15 a.m., followed by the singing of our national anthem by Dr. Jesse Fayen and a land acknowledgement by Edgar Busili. The ceremony will continue with opening remarks from Professor Malcolm Kelly, followed by interviews with our special guests. After the interviews, Kevin Hayward Jr. will perform Last Post, followed by a minute of silence and reflection. We will then hear the lament performed by Glenn Donovan, leading into the rouse and the raising of the colors. Next, we will hear the Act of Remembrance, and then followed by In Flanders Fields. Dr. Jesse Fayen will perform God Save the King before the marching out of our colors, marking the end of our ceremony. I want to thank each and every one of you for being with us today on this important day to honor our soldiers and veterans and the sacrifices that they've made, both on distant battlefields and right here in our own communities. These weren't just statistics or names on a memorial, but they were fathers, sons, brothers, and husbands, young men with families, dreams, and futures ahead of them. They lived on the very streets that we walk on to this day, and they gave up everything so that we might have a chance to live in peace and freedom, lest we forget.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Art Center. My name is Malcolm Kelly. Today, we continue a tradition here that goes back to the year 2000, first started by Ted Barris, then picked up by Ellen Besner, and I now have the honor of doing it myself. I'd first like to welcome Corporal Glenn Donovan, retired of the 48th Highlanders Pipes and Drums. I'd also like to welcome the Color Guard, which is provided by the Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 10, Todd Morton, under the command of John Chung. And Todd Morton is just down the street here, and they have been tremendous help to us over the years, and we appreciate that. I'd like to begin by inviting Dr. Jesse Fayen to the podium to sing O Canada.
Please sing with me. O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Color Guard retreat.
Guard, about, turn. Deposit, colors. Watch the lights.
Whoops.
About, turn. By the left. Quick, march. Guard, halt. Break up.
Please be seated. Centennial College is proud to be a part of a rich history of education in this province and in this city. We acknowledge that we are on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and pay tribute to their legacy and the legacy of all First Peoples of Canada as we strengthen ties with the communities we serve and build the future through learning and through our graduates. Today, the traditional meeting place of Toronto is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the communities that have grown in the treaty lands of the Mississauga. We acknowledge that we are all treaty people and accept our responsibility to honor all our relations. Well, here we are again at Remembrance Day. Remembrance Day began as Armistice Day in 1919, 1 year after the conclusion of the war to end all war, the Great War, World War I, that ran from 1914 to 1918 and cost the lives of over 20 million men and women. It was, of course, not the war that ended all wars. Today, we remember the men and women of our Canadian Armed Forces who gave their lives during the First World War, the Second World War, the Korean conflict, and in Afghanistan. Our particular focus today will be on Afghanistan, and we will move to our guests in a moment. I would like to mention that on 3 days ago, on Saturday, was Indigenous Peoples Day, where our First Nations people honor the legacy of the hundreds of First Nations men who gave their lives in the Second World War and the First World War, and in conflict since. It's also a time, personally, for me to remember one of my great heroes, Tom Longboat. Tom Longboat was one of the most famous runners in Canada and the world. He won the Boston Marathon in 1907 and was very well known everywhere. He was an Olympian. In the First World War, Tom Longboat joined the army and became a runner. Now, a runner in combat in the First World War was a very dangerous job. If communication lines were cut between different parts of the line, the runner's job was to take a message from one part or from headquarters and run it to a certain part of the line. The other side had them too. And whenever one was seen, sometimes they would actually open up an artillery barrage to try to get the one man who was carrying the message. Tom Longboat was badly wounded in the First World War. A story I love, but he came home and lived a long life. A story I love is he was running between one place and another, and an officer stopped him, and the officer said, "Who do you think you are, Tom Longboat?" And he said, "Yes, sir, I am Tom Longboat." I would like to tell you a story. It's a story I've never told in public before. The First World War ended with the armistice at 11 a.m. on November the 11th, 1918. 7 days later in Sheffield, a boy was born. And he was born to just his mother, to a Catholic family. They moved to Barnsley shortly afterwards. Barnsley in Britain was the home of the brass band, which was a great tradition. He lived with his mother, Mary, and his sister until the start of the Depression. And when the Depression hit, you imagine how hard the Depression was on people who are middle class or even, but for the poor it was a disaster, a catastrophe. And he was placed into a Catholic orphanage. And in 1934, when he turned 16, he joined the British Army as what was called a band boy, and which was how you got in a year early or 2 years early. And he joined the Rifle Brigade, which was one of the elite units in the British Army, and he became a bandsman in the Rifle Brigade. 2 years after that, he was sent to Malta with the 2nd Battalion of the Rifle Brigade and spent 2 glorious years in Malta with the forces. The war came, and the Germans came over the border in France and invaded France in the Low Countries on May the 10th, 1940. And they quickly broke through the lines at Sedan and headed for the coast, the northern coast. Now, many of you know about Dunkirk. Many of you don't know about Calais. 3 brigades of rifle units, Rifle Brigade, King's Royal Rifle Corps, Queen Victoria Rifles, were sent to Calais, and they were told to hold to the last man. Back at that time, bandsmen were expected to be stretcher bearers in combat. And they held them back and held them back and held them back until finally, with 2 days to go before Calais fell, they sent them over, and most of the band was killed or captured. The Germans opened their final attack with 18 hours to go before the city fell. Dive bombers, level bombers, heavy artillery, light artillery, and as they got closer, mortars, machine gun fire. This young man wound up on the end of the East Mole after the town had fallen. And he was one of the famous in Britain, 47 survivors pulled off the East Mole by HMS Gulzar, a converted Royal Navy yacht, and he comes back. Shortly after, he began to suffer the effects of shell shock. It stayed with him all of his life. This young man was a superior musician. If you look at his war records, you see, or his army records, year after year, it says, superior musician. The army was not given to hyperbole, so they would not give out superior very often. 1947, he was allowed to be one of the first non-commissioned officers to join Kneller Hall, which was one of the world's most famous music schools. And he was a member of the Kneller Hall Golden Trumpets at Princess Elizabeth's wedding in Westminster Abbey to the future Prince Philip. Shortly after, he suffered a breakdown, and he did not finish at Kneller Hall, where he would have become an officer, and he eventually would have been in charge of one of the great military bands in Britain. He stayed in the army until 1959. And once he left, and during that time, by the way, also, This is a man with no luck. He and his band were entertaining troops at a forward MASH unit in Korea after the Korean War got started, just south of the Chosin Reservoir. The Chinese came over the border, and they had to fight their way out for 3 days through snow, through blizzards and snow drifts and things to get out. He was never the same. People who knew him said he was never the same. And some of the things that he could not do, first of all, he had a bad drinking problem, which he fought all of his life. But another thing that he had is just simple things. He could not drive on the Don Valley Parkway or the 401. Too much stress. So if we had to go, to go to the airport, you had to go all the way down Eglinton Avenue to get to the airport. He died in 1998. My father, William Thomas Patrick Kelly. Today's subject is something that has been with me literally all of my life, because I have seen how hard it is for people. Canadian troops were in Afghanistan from 2001 to 2014. We suffered 158 killed, 2,000 wounded during that time. Now, the wounded are not just people who were seriously hurt and recovered, lost an arm, lost a leg. There are also people who had mental and emotional wounds. And what we're going to look at today is how in our modern times we now are looking after these people as best we can. It's called post-traumatic stress disorder. Originally shell shock, then it became combat fatigue in the Second World War, still 2 words, more syllables. And now is PTSD. We are absolutely honored today to have 2 special guests who can speak to this topic quite personally. They are Lieutenant Colonel Jason Morische, who is the immediate past commanding officer of the 48th Highlanders of Canada, one of our most famous regiments. We also have with us Captain Retired Philip Ralph, Director, Health Services, Wounded Warriors of Canada. Also around here, we have, somewhere around here taking photographs, is Matt Walks, who's the communications person for Wounded Warriors Canada. Where are you, Matt? There he is, at the back there. Matt is a graduate of our journalism program here at Centennial College. It's funny how you run into people who have stories. One of our current students in the journalism program, Natasha, her uncle was a doctor in the United States Army. He served in Iraq in the early 2000s. His specialty in the Army was dealing with soldiers who had mental and emotional difficulties that were struggling. And we thank him for his service. Let's move along. Lieutenant Colonel Jason Morische, I believe you have a microphone there, right there. You could pick that up. Is our microphone on? It is on. We are told it's on.
We're good?
Okay.
I'll try not to eat it.
Jason, thank you very much for coming here, Colonel. It is such an honor to have you.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much for holding this.
And I've known Jason and his family, the Colonel and his family, for some years now because they live up the street and around the corner from me. And his dog hates me.
Fact.
It's a fact. All dogs love me, except this one.
She's a hard case.
Yes. Sir, could you please tell us about how long you were in Afghanistan, when you were there, and what your job was?
Okay. Without rambling too much, thanks for letting me be here today. And thank you all for actually taking the time out of your day to actually be here and listen to some of the babbling that I will go on about very shortly. So that you all understand, I am a reservist. So I joined the military in 1997. I joined a reserve infantry unit, but I was foolish enough to volunteer to participate in regular force training, which opened up a number of doors for me. That carried on for a long period of time through law school, through articling, through being a defense counsel, and all the things that went along with that. I still committed time to courses, exercises, exchanges with other militaries, and built up both my skills and knowledge, and most importantly, friends. I tell junior officers when they join that the Army is so small that they need to make sure that they make friends where they can and make enemies only where they must. That paid dividends for me later on because as Afghanistan became a greater and greater problem, more and more reservists were being needed to help fill expanding roles. For my many sins, I made the right friends and put my hand up at a very opportune time and was given a combat leadership position with what was called affectionately the omelet, the operational mentor liaison team. So through 2009, the tail end of that, I began my pre-training for Afghanistan, which was fairly significant. As we were preparing for combat-related operations, it was everything from physical fitness testing all the way through to being able to call in artillery and airstrikes, because those are things that we might have had to do. However, one of the other interesting parts that we don't talk too much about is that we had to learn a great deal about Afghan culture, about the Islamic faith, and a lot of the cultural norms of Afghanistan that were not necessarily the same as, say, other parts of the Middle East that other people had had more exposure to, because Afghanistan is very much its own place. And being at the confluence of a lot of places throughout history, we had a lot to learn. So in 2010, I deployed and was there for, and I'm really sorry, Malcolm, but these are the kind of answers I give that are really long-winded. I was there for just over 8 months. As government policy changed, our tour was somewhat extended. So as you're going to get to a little bit later on, I asked for something and I got a little more of it than I bargained for.
Sir, you were in combat. There used to be, I guess, this idea that being in a combat zone was endless hours of boredom, occasionally broken up by 3 minutes of stark raving terror. However, it seems to me, from reading through some of the things you've talked about and other things, that whenever you were in the combat zone in Afghanistan, because of what a different place it was, the stress was enormous practically all the time.
Yes, we live in a bubble here. It's really protected. We are allowed to concern ourselves with things that we might think are very important, but there are very large swathes of the world that have people that have to worry about far more immediate problems, like clean water, like food, like shelter. So when you take people out of this environment and throw them into a country that has, for all intents and purposes, completely fallen apart, people did not rely very much on the central government. They relied on their tribal and family hierarchical organizations. They relied on more immediate district government because nothing really functioned in Afghanistan beyond that level. You had to make what you had or take it, depending. So in that environment, things were stressful enough. Just driving down the road was interesting because, frankly, anything with 4 wheels, or sometimes 3, and a motor was good enough. You could put that on the road. There were no driver's licenses, so people drove in some pretty curious ways. Seeing people loaded up onto an excavator, literally in the front bucket, and then coming to a crashing halt at a moment, and all of the people flying out of it. It's not something you would normally see here. Those are the silly examples of stress. But as I have told people on many occasions, every time we went out on a patrol, whether it was to go and meet with a local mullah to go and discuss how we could assist with rebuilding part of their mosque, or whether it was to go out and do a more combat-focused operation, there was always someone trying to blow me up. There was always someone trying to shoot me. And I had to be painfully aware of that, and more importantly, I had to be aware of that for my troops. So everything I did to plan before we left had to be geared towards how can I keep them the safest while still doing our job. It's something that weighs on me as a leader, but even for my troops. I had 2 guys who were my point team almost always because they had outstanding sense of things. They knew what looked right and what looked wrong. They understood how to read people. You can't do that for months without it wearing on you. You guys go through exam periods, the stress that leads up to those, and then that dump of adrenaline when you're done. That's why I always used to get sick after exams. Imagine doing that for months on end. That constant wind up that does not release any tension whatsoever because you just go out and do the same thing again the next day. That wears on everyone. And when you take people from an environment where you're not, no matter how much we talked about it during pre-training, you can't understand it. It's like juggling. I can give you a book and say, okay, this is how you juggle, read this. Until you get given the 3 balls and try to throw them in the air and keep them there. The understanding of how to do that is quite different. So the same goes for how we prepared for Afghanistan while we were made aware of the dangers and all of the things that we were going to be doing. And thank God there was a lot of acceptance of people coming back and having trouble readjusting. We knew that going in, that there was going to be support on the back end for everyone. It doesn't take away from that when it hits you in the face. There's a long-winded answer yet again to your very simple question.
Thank you. You're quoted in a long interview that you did with Canada's War Museum. You said, and we were talking about the excitement of people going out to Afghanistan because they're soldiers and they're going out. And you said, and I'm quoting, "Careful what you ask for, because you may get more of it than you want. Between guys getting killed or wounded, kids getting torn up, firefights, improvised explosive devices." How did you, as the leader of these men and women, how did it affect you, and how did you help those men and women to get over these things?
A lot of these things start early on. You folks here especially, I can see how many dozens of people are working here. You learn how to work as a team, and you've got to suffer each other at various points. You're all very different, but you're all here unified by wanting to do something. So in this case, putting on a broadcast and doing an outstanding job, I hope, by the end of all this. The same as a leader, I have to figure out a way to build a team before we go anywhere. How do I get people who are so different from such disparate backgrounds to work together? I have to remind troops all the time that just because you're wearing the same flag or the same cap badge doesn't mean that you're the same person. The way we all approach different things is going to, at times, be difficult. So building that team in advance and getting people comfortable with one another, we in the Army have very interesting ways of doing that, not the least of which is that we all have to live in pretty close proximity to one another for long periods of time, and we don't smell very good after doing certain things. But that's how things start. It's to get people to understand how to be team members, how to work together, and to be comfortable enough to be able to deal with each other's nonsense when it happens. That's step number 1, and that's not a small thing. I will say that for any failings that people may see in the military, one of the things that has drastically improved over time has been the institutional dealing with of the hidden injuries and what happens to people when they come home. You can't see some of the things that you see in a war zone and not have it resonate and not have it rattle around in your head and not have it pop out again at the most inopportune times. The institution, the Department of National Defense, Canadian Armed Forces, as I said, are now so much better at acknowledging it and accepting it, because all of us know someone. And we know someone from the one end of the scale, I guess if you wanted to call it like the number one on the dial, where, you know, I can attest to my temper problems at times, or at least my kids can. And then we know people that are on, you know, the spinal tap 11, and they just are unable to function anymore without a great deal of intervention and assistance. The CAF has done a lot to help make both organizations and resources available to people. Is it perfect? No, but PTSD is a very individual thing, and there is no one-size-fits-all solution, I think, as the Padre is going to be speaking about later on. So the other part of being a leader was that I needed to make sure that my guys knew that they were, and I'm saying guys because they were in fact just all males at that time. It's not to besmirch anyone. There are a lot of outstanding women who serve in the Canadian Armed Forces, so please don't think that using one pronoun is going to be is for a reason other than that. I had to get my guys to understand that those things were out there for them and that they were going to be available for them, and it was absolutely okay and supported to use them when you came home or at any other time, because we had Padres on deployment. Their job was to be there as a person outside of the chain of command, to be able to go and vent to if you needed to, or explain that I'm having a moment and I don't know how to go to, you know, for instance, me. One of my troops didn't feel comfortable coming to me and saying something. Thankfully, that didn't happen. They used to complain to me a lot, which was awesome. I loved hearing the complaints because it usually meant I was doing something wrong and I needed to fix it. So there's that during phase that I needed to make sure that they understood what was going on. Afterwards, we had a very well-oiled machine as far as reintegration was set up after deployment. So we went to Cyprus. It sounds really glamorous. In some ways it was. But half of our day every day for that period was spent on counseling. So we were separated by ranks. So the leaders went one way, troops went another, so they could complain about us behind our back, which again is okay. That those sessions, I think after the first 20 minutes, everyone got it and realized that they were actually helpful. I think most of us were kind of poo-pooing a lot of those things when we first walked in the door, and like I said, it lasted maybe 20 minutes, and we could start to see the value in it. And being in a reasonably small group to vent some of the things that you'd seen, done, thought, or were thinking was awesome. And then afterwards, there were individual sessions that you could go and sort out so that you could do those. My job as a leader was to make sure that my troops understood that and that it was okay to keep on talking, that there was no harm or foul and no weakness in saying that you're having a tough time. It's better to address it, acknowledge it, and fix it than pretend it's not there. But the last part comes then sort of after the after, which was when we came home. I'm still in touch with a lot of people I served with, and that's 15 years on. Stay in touch, whether it's just emails occasionally or just reaching out every once in a while to check on a couple of the guys who had a little tougher time or were carrying baggage from other tours prior. So my job as a leader never really stopped. They're not my troops anymore. Some of them are out of the Army, some of them are in, but regardless, when you form that bond with someone, it doesn't dissolve. And my job, and the job of all the other leaders I know, was to hang on to those people and make sure that they're okay. So it started early, and 15 years on is still going on to greater and lesser degrees. And I'm okay with that. I'll keep doing it until I can.
Thank you very much, Colonel. We honor you for your service and for the service of the men and women who served with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We move now to Captain Retired Phil Ralph, Director of Clinical Services for Wounded Warriors Canada. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Padre, You served for over a quarter of a century with the Canadian Armed Forces until you were released in 2016. You were regimental chaplain to the 32 Combat Engineer Regiment in Toronto. And you had a chance as a chaplain to see what some of the difficulties were for the people who are coming back. But I know that as the son of a firefighter, you were the son of a longtime East York firefighter. But as the son of a firefighter, you saw some of this even when you were growing up. But you told me in our pre-interview that there were two things that really got you involved and helped to start Wounded Warriors Canada. The first was your relationship with a soldier named Mike McTagg. Now, I was wondering if you could tell us about that, please.
Yeah, so just to step back a bit, I don't know what you think the role of a chaplain or a padre is in the Canadian Forces. You probably think when you hear padre that he gets up like a church minister and does Sunday services. There's not a lot of that in the Army. There's a lot of caring for soldier. The formal job description is to care for the welfare and the morale of the soldiers and their dependents, and to act as a liaison really to the commanding officer and the command staff to let them know how things are going, what improvements can be made, those kinds of things, to really be part of that leadership team. But one of the formal jobs that chaplains have in today's Canadian Armed Forces is whenever someone in the forces, a member of the forces, is seriously wounded or killed or dies under certain circumstances, it is the chaplain's role to go and notify the family, to deliver the worst news that family will ever get. We started in the early 1990s. We really didn't have a great system, and I remember going once or twice by myself. That was a bad system. And then later on, towards the end of the 1990s, we were paired with the senior officer, usually of the lieutenant colonel rank, and went to the door. So there were two of us to talk to the family. That happened for soldiers killed in Bosnia in training in the 1990s, and happened a number of times for soldiers that were killed in Afghanistan. And because it's based in Toronto, although military bases, usually you think of them as far away, Petawawa or Edmonton, etc. But many of the families are in the GTA, and so this brigade, 32 Brigade Group, ended up getting the bulk of a lot of notifications during the time in Afghanistan. So that sort of the background. So during that time, basically I slept with my dress uniform on a hanger, ready to go at a moment's notice. And this will say how old it was, with my BlackBerry beside the on the end table. And so I had my military BlackBerry, and because of the time difference in the war zones and the battle rhythm over there, if something untoward happened, the phone call usually came in about 3:30 in the morning, after things went through the chain of command, after they identified things and finally got back through the chain and identified the chaplain that would make the notification. So, by the way, to this day, my cell phone is nowhere near my bedroom, because it's not a good memory when the phone. My phone went off after I retired once in the middle of the night, and I didn't realize how much that had affected me. So my cell phone is now nowhere near my bedroom because of that experience. But back then, if it rang at 3:30 in the morning, as it did September 18th, 2006, I answered my phone. It was my good friend who was the brigade chaplain at the time, telling me that one of my soldiers, This was one that I was going to go. It was a soldier that was known to me. It was a member of my regiment. Had been seriously injured by a roadside bomb. They had this young man. So he wasn't quite 20 years old, and he'd been in theater, that is in Afghanistan, for about a month. In that time, he had seen his section commander killed. He had seen he'd been up on the hill when the American forces mistook the Canadian forces and killed a number by friendly fire. He was on the hill watching that. And a couple other things happened in that short month he was in theater. He saw more in 1 month than I would wish any human being see in an entire lifetime. The day that he was wounded was a day that they thought it was a little bit going to be an easier day. But as the colonel has intimated, in Afghanistan you never quite know what the easy day is. They were giving out candies to children, etc., and somebody in a bicycle-borne suicide vest went in the middle of the Canadian soldiers and blew himself up. And it seriously injured 4 Canadians, mostly Canadian military engineers, and killed a number of others and civilians, and 1 cow. I always say 1 cow because the cow actually saved a whole bunch of lives because it absorbed a whole bunch of shrapnel. Mike was very seriously wounded, so we didn't know at that point whether or not he was going to live. So I was tasked and had a direct line to the doctors in Kandahar with the duty of going to Mike's dad and letting him know about the condition of his son, because his son couldn't talk for himself. So I went with my commanding officer at the time to his father, Mike's dad in Aurelia, let him know the condition, got him in touch with the doctor, had a conversation. Over the next couple days, Mike seemed to be doing better. And then they took him out of theater in Afghanistan and took him to one of the most high-tech, marvelous hospital facilities that you'll ever see in the world, and it's in Langstuhl, Germany. It's the U.S. medical hospital there. They do wonderful work. My wife was an ICU nurse, so I've seen lots of the ICUs, including in ICU at sick kids. So I've seen lots of high-tech ICU units, but the level of care there was just outstanding. When Mike was transported from Afghanistan to Frankfurt and into Langstuhl, he took a turn for the worst. They didn't know whether he was going to make it, so they decided to fly his father over and his brother, and I went over with another officer to assist them. While we were there, I won't keep you on edge about that. Mike is doing just fine today, so I want to tell you that part. But at that point, we weren't sure. And what we noticed was, they were caring for his physical well-being, so you threw whatever you could find on the airplane with him, and a lot of these guys ended up with not much there, and a very small Canadian contingent in an American hospital, feeling very far from home. So we decided to start a fund, a bunch of us, to just give comfort items to soldiers that were recovering. That devolved into a Padres fund that was operated over there for a while. And then as time passed, what happened was we pulled out of Afghanistan, and the war wound down there for Canadians. And then what we were going to do with the funds, et cetera. And by that time, I was still doing notifications, as were chaplains throughout the country, but something had changed. It's one thing to go to the door of a family and to tell them that their loved one has been killed in action. Because those of us who wore or wear a uniform know that that might be part of the risk. That's what we do. And you can't have an army and have an army fighting and never have any casualties, unfortunately. And so, although as hard as that was, it was something that at least mentally you could explain. It was as a result of them doing the job and the actions of the enemy. But as we got through 2009, 2010, and on beyond that, I was going to more and more and more and more doors telling loved ones that they had lost their loved one to suicide. And that was harder to explain, at least in my mind. And we needed to do something about that. So as the fund was there, the board at the time, the leadership at the time decided that Canada was doing they were doing an excellent job on physical injuries. But at that point in time, not so much in terms of mental health. And so we decided to become an organization that's focused solely on mental health. And today, we're Canada's leading national mental health service provider for veterans, first responders, and their families.
And this is Wounded Warriors Canada.
Wounded Warriors Canada, yes.
Okay. Let's start here. Let's start the question here. What are the types of services that you offer now today, now that the organization has grown past 10 years?
Okay, so as we sometimes joke in the office that it's a overnight 10-year success, but we started, not really, just kind of not knowing what was out there, and we started like a lot of organizations. We raised money, we identified programs and we funded them, and then I was the program director back then and just kind of looked at them and saw what they were doing and whether or not it was good or we were seeing results, and so we were kind of like the United Way, just funding out money. All that changed in 2015. We met probably the leading clinical mind in Canada when it comes to veterans and mental health. His name is Dr. Tim Black. He's now our national clinical director. To show how much he's invested in the organization, he left a tenured professor position at Victoria University. He was the head of the psychology department. Now he's full-time with us as our national clinical director, solely focused on providing the best clinical services for people we call trauma-exposed professionals. Because we always ask, well, I'm a prison guard, am I for one? And so trauma-exposed professionals, people who, unlike most people in society, as the very nature of their job, will be exposed, not might be, but will be exposed to trauma beyond that which a normal lifetime would expect. And because, we're those crazy people who run towards danger, where smart people all run away from danger. And that's a job description. So that gives us a different frame on life. It gives us a different way of thinking about things. So if you're going to treat people that have been trained that way, then you're going to have to treat them as the professionals they are, with the respect they are, and understanding the culture from which they come. Mm-hmm. That warrior culture, and understanding that. And so we've developed programs for individuals, for families, for spouses, for children, and for surviving families. These are residential, and when we say residential, don't think about a hospital and white coats. And we take them to a resort-type facility, get them checked in, get them all relaxed, and for 8 hours a day, they do group clinical counseling in a setting with two of the best clinicians in the country, and a lived experience peer or couple that has come from our programs and is now implementing some of those solutions and is doing very well. And in 2016, when we moved just from doing military to first responders, one of the things that the first responder community, our police, our fire, our EMS were saying to us as they came through our downstream treatment programs was, wow, this is transformative, this is life-saving. How come nobody told me about this stuff earlier? And so now we've moved very, very strongly into upstream education, training programs, those kinds of things. Matter of fact, right here in the city of Toronto, Toronto was the second force in Canada to require that every single one of their recruits take the Wounded Warriors Canada Before Operational Stress program before they ever get on their first shift in a police car, so they kind of know what to expect. So that's been the transformative spot. One of the great things that's happened in the last year is we've been working with WSIB and the province of Ontario for quite some time, telling them that they needed culturally specific programming, and we're pleased to be the lead organization to launch Warrior Health this year. And I'll tell you a secret. It's paid for by the Ontario government. You've all got cell phones, I know. So go in the App Store or the Google Play Store. Punch in Warrior Health. You can download that app. It's meant for trauma-exposed professionals, for the 80,000 first responders and their families in the province of Ontario. But every single mental health resource there is free, including self-assessments, and the other thing is, it is 100% anonymous. There are no tracking, no cookies, no information, nothing. The only information that we receive back in our consortium is how many times it's been accessed. And since we launched it in May of this year, it's been accessed well over 100,000 times. It's amazing.
Thank you, sir. And we appreciate everything that Wounded Warriors has done. I'd like to point out just a couple of things. Among the groups that Wounded Warriors works with are our paramedic students here at Centennial College to help them as they're getting ready to go out and do a job that is incredibly stressful. It's amazing, and we thank you for your service, sir, and we thank you for what your organization is doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you got time, I got one little antidote.
Please.
Okay, so since you started with the World Wars, and since it's Remembrance Day tomorrow, and I brought something with me, and Matt Waxy's going to go, oh no, not this story again. I already heard it over in Europe, but I wore a vest today because I got a pocket watch, and I don't usually carry a pocket watch because people don't carry pocket watches anymore. But this pocket watch is something that was always in my uniform pocket every Remembrance Day, because this pocket watch was given to my uncle, my dad's brother, when he went off to the Second World War. And back then, you know, it wasn't a big emotional thing, and dads didn't, you know, dads being dads, especially back then, didn't get into a whole thing. And so my grandfather's way of saying that he really cared for his son was he gave him this watch and put his initials on the back, and it was originally my grandfather's watch. And he simply handed it to him and said, I want to see the watch back. That was his way of saying, come home. I'll tell you though, my uncle, who went through the Netherlands and was in the South Alberta Regiment, was blown up in a tank. He was the only one who survived. He came home, and if the services like Wounded Warriors Canada had been available then, he would have had a much better life. I often say my uncle came back very broken, but the watch still keeps perfect time. And I'm happy to say that we told that story this past September in Bergen-op-Zoom, which was a town that was liberated by the South Alberta Regiment, the Lincoln and Welland Regiment, and your guys were around in the area too. And so it was And I just got a call back from the mayor's office, and they saw the story. And tomorrow on Remembrance Day in the Netherlands, the mayor of Bergen-op-Zoom is going to remember my uncle and tell his story in the Netherlands.
That's wonderful.
It's just a, it's a really, it really brought tears to my eyes that because my uncle was one of the vast, unnumbered, unnamed, unknown kind of troops. He was a replacement troop. He'd been in for a little while, never got above the rank of trooper, but he's going to be remembered there at the Remembrance service tomorrow. So that's exciting.
That's a wonderful story, Padre. Thank you.
Never to be outdone by stories, but this isn't a story, and I promise it'll be quick because I want you all to remember these things. One, if people who fancy themselves being harder than Christmas cake can understand and accept that they have mental health problems and are suffering, I hope that everyone, whether here or who's going to maybe end up watching this or see it now, do the same. It's okay to go get help. A lot of people don't. I've buried too many friends. It's okay if it's not you that suffered the trauma, but you're someone that loves that person and you're close enough for it to hurt. Go get help. Lastly, tomorrow's Remembrance Day. And this gets harder and harder every year that we get further and further away from conflict. Why does it matter anymore? There are obvious answers. But what I try to get people to remember is this. People don't volunteer to go and defend their country because they just have some really weird fetish that serves some selfish purpose. They're serving others, and they're serving you. The best way to honor that, for some of you, would be to join the forces. But I'm not going to suggest that to everyone because not everyone is suited for it. It is a very unique skill set and a very unique mindset. Now, if you're one of those people, please do. But for the majority of you, I beg you to honor the veterans who've fallen, those who came home injured in one way or another, by starting to look outside of yourself. Look to do something for your neighbor. Look to do something for your town, your community, in some way, shape, or form. Pick one and do something for someone else, because that's what veterans did. And that is the way I hope we will be able to remember them, rather than another generation of veterans that we have to then acknowledge. I would rather that every single one of you say, I actually took 5 minutes to go and shovel my neighbor's driveway because it snows in November now. But that is the thing. I try to drive it home with students. I try to drive it home with everyone I can talk to. So having a camera now in front of my face, I'm sorry, but I need to reiterate it, and I would be remiss if I didn't say it. Trying to find a community within this country to serve to make it better is the way that you can actually do something positive for those veterans that we try to remember once a year in an ongoing basis. And if you do it for someone, I hope someone will do it for you. Please take that time, not just to think about veterans once a year, but honor their memory. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Colonel. We'll now move on to the ceremonial part of our time. Color guard to the front.
Guard, attention. By the left. Quick, march. Guard, halt! Carry colors. About turn.
As is tradition, the last post today will be played by a student from the University of Toronto Bachelor of Music program, and we have been honored to have them with us for 10 years now. Today it's going to be played by Mr. Kevin Hayward Jr., who is the son of a very fine jazz musician. The last post calls the soldiers back to camp at the end of the day, and it's a time when you set the guard for the night. In the context of this, it is calling the dead back from the fields. We then follow that with a minute of silence. Then our piper, Glenn Donovan, 48th Highlanders, will play the lament. The lament is meant to represent the sorrow of the families that have lost. Then we will have the rouse. The rouse is a morning call, but in this case, it is calling the soldiers to heaven. Kevin, sir. Edgar? They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. We will remember them. Color Guard retreat.
Guard, carry colors. By the left, quick march.
In May of 1915, a doctor from Toronto who had moved to Montreal, Dr. John McCrae, had lost his best friend in combat at the Second Battle of Ypres in Belgium.
Right, left, left.
And he was moved after about 24 hours of surgery to come out of his of the trench area that he was working in and jot down a few lines. He didn't think very much of them at the time, stuffed them back in his pocket. He read them to a friend, and his friend said he should send them off to a few magazines in London to see if they published them. None of them did. Finally, the friend sent a letter with the poem to the famous magazine Punch. They loved it, they printed it. Dr. McCrae would not survive the war. He would die of pneumonia in 1918, just prior to the cessation of the conflict. But he left us with the most famous poem of the First World War. I would like to invite Jeffrey Turner of the Broadcasting, Film, Television, Digital Media, and Radio Programs of Centennial College to come forward to do the reading. I'd like you to listen to it because he's worked very hard on doing it properly. The other thing I would like to point out is that Jeffrey is a member of the fraternity that Dr. McCrae was part of 110 years ago. Jeffrey, please.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands, we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I now ask Dr. Jesse Fayan to come to and lead us in God Save the King.
God save our gracious King, long live our noble King. God save the King. Send him victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the King. Thy choicest gifts in store on him be pleased to pour. Long may he reign. May he defend our laws and ever give us cause to sing with heart and voice, God save the King.
Thank you, Jesse. Before the piper leads us out, I would like to say that we're going to have coffee, tea, and refreshments in room 149. The journalism students will be doing short interviews with our guests right afterwards. The refreshments are provided by the culinary students of Centennial College. Piper, lead us out, please. Yes, it's extreme.